Everyone in the eastern corridor of New York's underworld knew the name Rocco Valenti. They didn't speak it loudly. They didn't speak it casually. They spoke it the way people spoke about storms or sudden deaths, only when necessary, and always with a glance over the shoulder. Rocco Valenti didn't just control territory. He controlled atmosphere. Wherever he sat, conversations lowered themselves. Wherever he stood, men straightened their backs without realizing why. He had built his reputation not through public brutality, but through something far more effective: certainty. Certainty that defiance ended badly. Certainty that disrespect was never forgotten. Certainty that mercy was a rumor people told themselves to sleep at night. Tonight, Rocco occupied his usual throne, the central booth of the Aurelius, an invitation-only club hidden beneath a private restaurant in Midtown. From the street, it looked forgettable. From the inside, it felt like stepping into another country. Low amber lighting kissed marble floors. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Leather seats held men who wore power the way others wore cologne: subtle, expensive, unmistakable. Armed security blended into shadows. Cameras watched everything. Nothing here happened by accident. Rocco sat relaxed, one arm draped over the back of the booth, his tailored suit pressed so sharply it looked sculpted onto his body. He wasn't speaking. He didn't need to. Around him, lieutenants and associates laughed a little too loudly at jokes he hadn't made yet. Fear did that to people. It made them perform. Across the room, nobody noticed the waitress. That was the point. She moved quietly between tables, her shoulders slightly hunched, her steps just unsteady enough to suggest clumsiness. The uniform she wore was a size too large, sleeves hanging past her wrists, apron tied tight at the waist like armor she didn't want. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun that did nothing to frame her face, and thick-framed glasses hid her eyes behind dull reflections. Her name tag read, Lena. She had been working at the Aurelius for just under a month. Long enough to learn where not to look. Long enough to know which tables not to linger near. Long enough to understand that invisibility was not just survival, it was currency. As she passed the outer ring of VIP tables, her tray balanced with practiced care, conversations quieted. Not because of her, but because Rocco Valenti had shifted slightly in his seat. Wine, a voice snapped from his table. Not Rocco's. One of his men. Lena stopped instantly. Her pulse ticked up, but her face didn't change. She turned smoothly and approached the booth, eyes downcast, lips already parting in apology for a mistake she hadn't yet made. The bottle resting on her tray was rare. Expensive. Treated here with more respect than most human beings. Yes, sir, she said softly. Her voice was deliberately unimpressive. Breathier than necessary. Weak in a way that made people look past her instead of at her. As she leaned in to pour, laughter rippled around the table. One of the men, broad-shouldered, already drunk, reached out suddenly and grabbed her wrist. Not hard. Not gentle. Possessive. Careful there, he said with a grin. Wouldn't want you spilling anything, sweetheart. The tray wobbled. A few drops of deep red wine slid over the rim of the glass and splashed onto the pristine white of Rocco Valenti's shirt. Time stopped. The music didn't actually cut, but it might as well have. Conversations died mid-sentence. Somewhere near the bar, a glass shattered as it slipped from nerveless fingers. The man holding Lena's wrist went pale. Lena froze. For half a heartbeat, her body reacted on instinct. Weight shifting, muscles tightening, breath grounding itself deep in her abdomen. Then she crushed the response instantly, forcing a sharp inhale that sounded like panic. I'm so sorry, she stammered. I didn't mean, please. Rocco looked down at his shirt. He studied the spreading stain with quiet interest, as if inspecting a minor flaw in art he already owned. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze. His eyes met Lena's for the first time. They weren't angry. That would have been easier. They were cold. Measuring. Empty in the way predators got when deciding whether something was worth killing. The man holding her wrist released it as though burned. "Boss, he started. Rocco raised a single finger. Silence snapped into place. He stood, unhurried, towering over Lena without stepping closer. The room held its breath. "Do you know," Rocco said calmly, "how long it takes to find a tailor who understands restraint?" Lena swallowed. Her shoulders curled inward. "No, sir." "This shirt," he continued, brushing the fabric with 2 fingers, "cost more than your annual salary." "I'll pay for it," she said quickly. "I'll work it off. However long it takes." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not amusement. Recognition of a familiar script. "People always say that," he replied. "They always think effort equals value." He stepped closer now, not to threaten, but to examine. To confirm. Lena kept her eyes down. She focused on breathing too fast, on looking small, on being exactly what he expected her to be. Rocco nodded once, satisfied. Then he turned away, already dismissing her from relevance. "Get her out of my sight," he said casually. "And make sure she understands how lucky she is." As Lena backed away, murmurs resumed. Laughter crept back into the room, nervous but relieved. The hierarchy had reasserted itself. The king remained the king. Rocco Valenti sat back down, unbothered, already returning to business. He never noticed the calluses on Lena's knuckles. He never noticed how quickly her breathing returned to perfect control. And he never noticed the way her fingers curled slightly, just once, as if restraining something that had been waiting far longer than he had been ruling. To him, she was just a clumsy waitress. And that was the mistake. Lena did not go to the back immediately. She moved through the club on autopilot, delivering plates she no longer remembered picking up, refilling glasses she didn't recall emptying. Her face stayed apologetic. Her posture stayed small. To anyone watching, she looked shaken. Another fragile employee brushed too close to power and reminded of her place. Inside, she was counting her breaths. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. 4 counts. Then 6. It was an old rhythm. One drilled into her long before menus and aprons had entered her life. The rhythm of control. The rhythm that kept instincts buried where they couldn't betray her. Behind her glasses, her eyes tracked everything. The exits. The spacing between tables. The way security leaned, not alert, not sloppy, but complacent. The weight distribution of the men near Rocco's booth. Who was armed? Who was just loud? She hated that part of herself most. Because it never slept. In the narrow service corridor near the bar, Lena paused and set her tray down with careful precision. Her hands were steady now. Too steady. She flexed her fingers once, feeling the familiar ridges beneath her skin. Calluses. Not the soft kind from carrying trays. These were old. Dense. Layered. Built over years of impact, knuckles meeting bone, leather, canvas, flesh. She curled her hands into fists and released them slowly, as if reminding herself that they belonged to her again. 6 months. That's how long she had been clean. 6 months since Berlin. 6 months since the ring. 6 months since she had sworn never to let anyone see what lived under her skin. She reached up and adjusted her glasses, deliberately smudging one lens with her thumb. The blur helped. Made the room feel farther away. Less real. The Aurelius was not supposed to matter. It was just another stop. Another alias. Another place to disappear until the noise from her past died down enough to move again. But Rocco Valenti had a gravity that pulled things out of orbit. People didn't just fear him, they oriented themselves around him. His presence bent the room, bent behavior, bent fate. Men like that didn't survive by accident. They survived because they were excellent at recognizing weakness. That was the danger. Not his strength. His attention. In the kitchen, a fellow waitress leaned toward Lena, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I thought he was going to." "I'm fine," Lena replied softly, already tying her apron tighter. "It was my fault." The lie slid out smoothly. Too smoothly. She moved back onto the floor before sympathy could linger. Sympathy led to questions. Questions led to memory. Memory led to mistakes. As she passed near Rocco's booth again, she felt it, that subtle shift in the air. The way predators felt a disturbance even when they didn't know why. Rocco wasn't looking at her. But he was listening. She kept her head down, shoulders rounded, steps slightly uneven. It was an act she had perfected, appearing clumsy without actually being careless. Every stumble was calculated. Every hesitation measured. And yet, as she walked away, she felt it again. That pressure between the shoulder blades. The sensation of being assessed. Rocco Valenti leaned back in his seat, fingers steepled loosely in front of him. The wine stain on his shirt had been dabbed, but not removed. He hadn't changed. He rarely did. "She didn't cry," he said quietly. One of his men chuckled. "Some people freeze, boss." Rocco's eyes followed Lena's retreating form. "No," he murmured. "That wasn't freezing." "What was it then?" Rocco didn't answer immediately. He replayed the moment in his mind, not the spill, not the apology, but the half-second before it. The way her balance had shifted. The way her body had tightened, then released. Like someone stopping themselves from moving too fast. "She's hiding something," he said at last. The man shrugged. "She's a waitress." Rocco smiled faintly. So was every lie that ever got someone killed. Back on the floor, Lena reached the far wall and paused near a mirrored column. For a moment, just one, she looked at herself. The reflection stared back blankly. Messy hair. Oversized uniform. Glasses that dulled her features. No one here would recognize the woman she used to be. The woman whose name was spoken in whispers in places far darker than this club. The woman who had learned to fight before she learned to vote. She pressed her palm flat against the cool marble wall, grounding herself. "You are not that person anymore. You are invisible. You are safe." A laugh burst from Rocco's table. Loud. Sharp. He was amused by something now, posture relaxed again. The danger seemed to pass, rolling off him like weather. Good, she thought. Let him forget me. But even as the thought formed, she knew it wasn't true. Men like Rocco Valenti didn't forget anomalies. They catalogued them. Filed them away until the right moment arrived. And moments always arrived. As the night deepened, the club grew looser. More alcohol. Less caution. The invisible lines between power and indulgence blurred. Lena worked faster now, movements efficient, conserving energy without thinking about it. She didn't notice the silence until it returned. A chair scraped back near the VIP booth. "Hey," a voice called casually. "You." Lena stopped. Slowly, she turned. Rocco Valenti was standing again. Not angry. Not smiling. Interested. "Come here," he said, as if summoning furniture. Her stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. This was the moment she had been avoiding since she walked into the Aurelius for the first time. She stepped forward, heart steady, mask firmly in place. "Yes, sir." Rocco looked at her the way a chess player looked at a board after spotting a pattern. He had no idea what she truly was. But he knew, without understanding why, that she was not what she pretended to be. And for the first time since she fled Europe, Lena felt it unmistakably. The past had found her. Lena stopped one step from the booth. Close enough to hear the ice clink in glasses. Close enough to smell the leather polish on the seats and the faint spice of expensive cologne. Too close to pretend this was routine. Rocco Valenti studied her in silence. Not her face. Not her uniform. Her stillness. Most people fidgeted when summoned like this. Shifted weight. Swallowed. Looked around for help that would never come. Lena did none of that. She stood with her hands folded neatly at her waist, head slightly bowed, posture just submissive enough to read as fear. Just controlled enough to feel wrong. You spill often? Rocco asked. No, sir, she replied softly. But tonight you did. Yes, sir. And you didn't shake. The words landed lightly, but they carried weight. Several men at the table glanced at one another. Someone chuckled nervously, hoping it was a joke. Lena lowered her gaze further. I'm sorry, sir. Rocco leaned back, fingers drumming once against the table. Do you know why I don't yell? She hesitated half a beat. No, sir. Because yelling is for people who need to be heard, he said calmly. I don't. He gestured toward the empty space beside the table. Stand there. Lena obeyed. The club continued breathing around them, but the circle of attention tightened. Nearby tables leaned subtly closer. No one wanted to look obvious. Everyone wanted to see. Rocco reached for his glass and lifted it, examining the wine against the light. Do you know what this is? A Bordeaux, she said. 1998. Correct. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. And how much does it cost? He asked. She shook her head quickly. I don't know, sir. Another lie. This one deliberate. Rocco smiled thinly. It costs more than you make in 6 months. A few men laughed. The sound carried relief. This was familiar territory, humiliation without blood. A ritual everyone here understood. Rocco set the glass down gently. And yet, he continued, you were careless with it. Lena's shoulders curled inward. It won't happen again. That's not the point, he replied. The point is that carelessness has consequences. He nodded to the man who had grabbed her wrist earlier. The man grinned, emboldened now, and stood. Boss, he said eagerly. Teach her, Rocco said, almost bored. The man stepped closer to Lena, invading her space. He was drunk, heavy, confident. He lifted a finger and tapped her glasses. These gotta go, he said. Can't even see who you're serving like that. Her pulse spiked, not visibly, not audibly. But sharply enough that she felt it in her teeth. Please, she said, voice small. I need them to see. The man laughed and reached up again, this time hooking his finger behind the frame. That was when it happened. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just wrong. As his hand moved, Lena's head shifted slightly to the side. Barely an inch. Not a flinch. A calculation. Her shoulder rolled minutely, redistributing weight to her back foot. She stopped herself halfway through the motion. Too late. The man's fingers brushed nothing but air. The glasses stayed on her face. Silence crashed down again, harder this time. Rocco's gaze snapped sharp. The man blinked, confused, and tried again. This time Lena let it happen. The glasses were pulled from her face, tossed carelessly onto the table. She blinked rapidly, squinting, playing the part. But Rocco wasn't watching her eyes anymore. He was watching her feet. Enough, he said quietly. The man froze. Rocco stood. He stepped around the table slowly, circling Lena like an afterthought. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the calm confidence of someone who had never been challenged in this room. You know, he murmured, most people react without thinking. Lena's fingers curled into her palms. They pull away. They jerk back. They panic. He leaned closer. You didn't. She said nothing. Rocco moved in front of her again and studied her face. Really studied it now, unobstructed by glass. The angles. The stillness. The lack of tears. You're either very brave, he said, or very stupid. A pause. Which is it? Lena swallowed. I don't know, sir. The wrong answer. Rocco straightened and turned to the room. Clear it. A few people laughed, unsure. Now, he said, louder. Chairs scraped. Feet moved. Security stepped in smoothly, guiding patrons toward exits with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the club felt cavernous, stripped of witnesses. Lena's heart began to pound, not from fear of him, but from what came next. Rocco waited until the last door closed. Then he turned back to her. Accidents, he said calmly, happen once. He took a step closer. After that, he continued, their choices. He lifted his hand, not fast, not threatening. Just enough to make a point. To humiliate. Lena saw the angle immediately. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. She slipped. Not away. Around. A clean, efficient movement, head offline, shoulder checking his forearm just enough to redirect the force. Not a strike. Not a block. A boxer's instinct. Rocco's hand sliced through empty air. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Lena realized what she had done. She hunched instantly, shrinking, eyes wide. I flinched, she whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Rocco didn't answer. He stared at his own hand. Then at her. Slowly, a smile crept across his face. Not amusement. Recognition. A waitress, he said softly, doesn't move like that. Lena knew, in that moment, that invisibility was gone. And whatever came next would not be gentle. The room felt smaller now. Without the music, without the crowd, the silence pressed in from every direction. The soft hum of hidden ventilation. The faint ticking of a wall clock Lena hadn't noticed before. Her own breathing, too loud, too fast, then deliberately slowed. Rocco Valenti did not move. He stood exactly where he was, one hand still raised, fingers slightly curled, as if frozen mid-thought. His eyes never left Lena's face. She kept her head bowed. Every instinct screamed at her to create distance. To step back. To reset the angle. But she forced herself to remain still, shoulders rounded, posture submissive. She let a tremor creep into her hands. Please, she said quietly. I didn't mean to. Rocco laughed once. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was curious. That wasn't a flinch, he said. That was timing. He took a slow step forward. Lena felt it immediately, the shift in energy. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was examination. The way trainers watched fighters before deciding how hard to push them. The way hunters watched animals they suspected might bite back. You didn't pull away, Rocco continued. You slipped inside the line. She shook her head quickly. I just got lucky. Rocco tilted his head. Luck doesn't roll the shoulder. Another step. Lena's back brushed the edge of the table. She hadn't even realized she was retreating. Behind her, the discarded glasses lay on the polished wood. Rocco's gaze flicked down, to her hands. Open them, he said. Her stomach tightened. Sir. Your hands, he repeated. Open them. For half a second, she considered refusing. The calculation flashed fast and sharp. Refusal escalates. Compliance delays. Delay buys options. She opened her palms. Rocco took her wrist, not rough, not gentle, and turned her hand toward the light. His thumb brushed across the skin just below her knuckles. He didn't need to press. The calluses told the story themselves. These, he said quietly, aren't from carrying plates. She said nothing. Rocco released her hand and stepped back, exhaling slowly through his nose. The smile was gone now. So, he said, almost pleasantly, let's stop pretending. Lena's pulse pounded in her ears. This was the moment. The one she had avoided for years. The line between hiding and being seen. I don't know what you think you saw, she began. I saw discipline, Rocco interrupted. I saw control. And I saw you stop yourself halfway through a movement that would have embarrassed me in front of my own men. He turned his back to her and walked toward the center of the room, hands clasped behind him. That tells me two things, he continued. First, you're trained. Second, you're scared of being discovered. He turned sharply. And I don't tolerate secrets in my house. Lena felt her chest tighten, not with fear of him, but with the weight of what revealing herself would cost. Names resurfaced. Faces. Blood on canvas. The sound of a bell she hadn't heard in 6 months but still felt in her bones. She straightened just a fraction. Rocco noticed. There it is, he said softly. You're not clumsy. You're careful. He gestured toward the far wall, where a heavy steel door blended almost seamlessly into the decor. You know what's down there? He asked. Lena's eyes flicked toward it before she could stop herself. The gym. The ring. The one place she could never afford to enter. Rocco smiled again, this time with satisfaction. Of course you do. He walked back to her, stopping an arm's length away. Close enough that she could smell the faint trace of smoke and leather on him. Close enough that if she moved the wrong way, this would turn violent fast. You owe me, he said calmly. $15,000. I'll pay it, she said automatically. With what? He replied. Your tips. She didn't answer. Rocco leaned in, voice lowering. I don't want money. Her stomach dropped. I want honesty, he continued. And since you don't seem inclined to give it freely. He straightened and raised his voice just enough to carry. We're going to settle this properly. Lena felt the trap close. If you walk away, Rocco said, my men will escort you out the back alley. They're not gentle. And they don't forget faces. Odd air flickered briefly in his eyes. But if you come with me, he continued, nodding toward the steel door, you step into the ring. Her heart slammed hard against her ribs. I don't fight, she said quietly. Rocco chuckled. Everyone fights. He glanced once more at her hands. Some of us just lie about it. He turned and headed for the door. 3 minutes, he called over his shoulder. If you last that long, we forget this ever happened. He paused, hand on the handle. And if you don't, he added calmly, you won't have to worry about hiding anymore. The door swung open with a low metallic groan. Rocco disappeared down the stairs. Lena stood alone in the silent room, staring at the darkness beyond the doorway. There it was. The choice she had been running from. And for the first time since she became invisible, she understood something with absolute clarity. This man didn't just underestimate her. He had just invited the part of her she was most afraid of into the light. Lena stood alone for several seconds after the steel door closed. The silence was no longer empty. It was loaded. She could still hear the echo of Rocco's footsteps fading down the stairs, unhurried, confident. A man who never questioned whether people followed, only how quickly. Her eyes drifted to the exits. Front door? Impossible. Security would stop her before she crossed the room. Back corridor? Narrow. Blind corners. His men would be waiting. Alley? She pictured it instantly, brick walls slick with old rain, dumpsters, nowhere to run. Men who wouldn't kill her quickly. Men who would enjoy proving a point. She closed her eyes. Not like this. She hadn't survived syndicates, rings, handlers, and boarders just to disappear behind a club with her face smashed into concrete. Her fingers trembled once. Then she forced them still. Control. She walked toward the steel door. Each step felt like betrayal, of the promise she had made to herself, of the quiet life she had built piece by fragile piece. The closer she got, the louder the memories became. Canvas under bare feet. The smell of iron and sweat. The bell. At the door, she stopped. For one brief moment, she considered refusing outright. Standing her ground. Letting whatever came happen. But Rocco Valenti didn't issue empty threats. And worse, he was curious now. Curiosity killed people like her. She reached up and untied the apron slowly, carefully, as if the movement itself might trigger something irreversible. The fabric slipped free and pooled at her feet. The uniform followed. Not discarded in anger. Folded neatly and placed on a nearby chair. Underneath, she wore simple clothes, dark leggings, a fitted tank top. Nothing that screamed danger. Nothing that hid it either. She reached up and removed her glasses. The world sharpened instantly. She picked them up, wiped the smudged lens with the hem of her shirt, and set them on the table beside the apron. A ritual. A line drawn. Then she opened the door. The stairwell was dimly lit, concrete walls stained with age and secrets. She descended slowly, hand trailing the railing, each step grounding her further into a body she had tried to forget. The gym beneath the Aurelius was not flashy. It didn't need to be. A regulation boxing ring sat at the center of the room, rope scarred, canvas permanently discolored by shadows no amount of cleaning could erase. Heavy bags lined the walls. Old trophies gathered dust on a shelf, relics of victories that were never celebrated publicly. Rocco stood inside the ring, already loosening his shoulders. He looked comfortable. Not a professional fighter. But not a man unfamiliar with violence either. His stance was relaxed, confident. The posture of someone used to winning through force and intimidation. Around the ring, his men took positions. Close enough to intervene. Far enough to enjoy the show. Rocco smiled when he saw her step onto the concrete floor. "There you are," he said. "I was starting to think you'd chosen the alley." She said nothing. He studied her now without pretense, her posture straighter, her eyes clear, her movements economical. "That's better," he remarked. "At least now you look honest." She stopped at the edge of the ring. "You said 3 minutes," she said. Rocco nodded. 3. And no weapons. He chuckled. "This is a courtesy." She glanced at the gloves hanging on the wall. "Bare hands," he added. "I want to feel it when I hit you." There it was. The provocation. The invitation to anger. She didn't take it. Instead, she stepped between the ropes and onto the canvas. The mat felt familiar beneath her feet. Too familiar. Her body responded instantly, balance adjusting, weight distributing, spine aligning. She had to consciously fight the urge to sink into a full stance. Control, she reminded herself. Survive. Don't dominate. Rocco rolled his neck once and raised his fists. "Timer," he called. One of his men slapped the bell. Clang. The sound punched straight through her chest. Rocco advanced immediately. No testing. No circling. He threw a straight punch aimed at her face, fast, heavy, decisive. Lena ducked clumsily, making it look like panic. The punch missed by inches. "Slippery," Rocco muttered, grinning. He followed with a hook. She stumbled backward, letting herself trip against the ropes. The crowd laughed. Good, she thought. Let them laugh. Get up, Rocco ordered. Don't disappoint me. She pushed herself upright, breathing hard, letting fear color her voice. I can't do this. The lie tasted bitter. Rocco lunged again, cornering her. He unleashed a series of body shots, powerful, aggressive, unrefined. She covered up, elbows tight, absorbing the blows on forearms and ribs, counting internally. Too much power. Poor accuracy. Overcommits. One punch slipped through and grazed her cheek. The skin split. Warm blood ran down her face. Something shifted. Rocco saw it. His eyes darkened. The sight of blood excited him. He wound up for a massive punch, a haymaker meant to end things. And in that instant, instinct overwhelmed restraint. The opening was perfect. Lena dropped her level, pivoted, and drove a precise strike into his midsection, not full force, not showy. Just accurate. The impact landed with a wet, hollow sound. Rocco froze. Then the air exploded out of his lungs. He staggered backward, clutching his chest, eyes wide, gasping silently as his body betrayed him. The gym went dead quiet. Lena stood still, chest heaving. She knew immediately what she had done. A waitress didn't know where to hit like that. A waitress didn't read openings that cleanly. Rocco dropped to one knee, struggling to breathe. When he looked up at her, there was no rage in his eyes. Only realization. Who, he wheezed, are you? Lena backed away toward the ropes, heart pounding. Not from the fight, but from exposure. I got lucky, she said. Rocco laughed weakly through the pain. Luck, he rasped, doesn't aim for the solar plexus. He forced himself upright, ignoring the agony, eyes locked on her with terrifying clarity. You're not a waitress, he said. And just like that, the game changed. Rocco Valenti straightened slowly. Every breath was a battle now. He hit it well, he always did, but Lena saw the truth immediately. The strike hadn't been devastating, but it was surgical. She had shut his diaphragm down just long enough to scare him. And that scared her. The room stayed silent. Rocco wiped the moisture from his eyes with the back of his hand and let out a harsh breath. That, he said, forcing a smirk, wasn't supposed to happen. Lena didn't answer. Her hands were still raised, open-palmed, non-threatening. To the untrained eye, it looked amateurish. To anyone who knew violence, it was something else entirely, defensive, adaptable, patient. Rocco noticed. He rolled his shoulders, testing the damage, then nodded once. All right, he said. Let's stop pretending. He came at her again, faster this time. The first punch grazed her shoulder. She let it. The second clipped her ribs. She hissed, staggered back, letting pain bloom just enough to sell it. The third sent her sprawling to the canvas. The men around the ring cheered. That's it. Someone shouted. Finish her. Lena pushed herself up slowly, breathing hard, blood still tracing a line down her cheek. Her vision tunneled for a moment, not from injury, but from memory. Berlin. A concrete pit. Men screaming her name like a curse. She shook it off. Not now. Rocco circled her, confidence returning as he mistook restraint for weakness. You should have stayed down, he said. You had your moment. She backed away, footwork deliberately sloppy, letting him herd her toward the corner. He lunged. She slipped, just enough. Not clean. Not obvious. The punch skimmed past her ear, close enough that she felt the air move. Rocco frowned. He attacked again. And again. Each time, she made it look messy. Late reactions. Poor angles. But the blows kept missing her vitals by fractions too precise to be coincidence. Rocco began to breathe harder. He didn't like this. He swung wider, throwing power instead of patience. His footwork grew heavier. His center of gravity rose. Overcommitting. She noted it instantly. A punch slammed into her forearm. Pain flared sharp and hot. She grunted and dropped to one knee, playing into it. The crowd roared approval. Rocco stepped in, raising his fist for the end. And then, without warning, everything slowed. The opening appeared exactly where it always did. Wide stance. Dropped shoulder. Exposed side. The part of her that had been dormant screamed to take it. End this. She didn't. She slipped sideways instead, letting his punch miss by a hair, and lightly tapped his ribs, barely a touch. Rocco froze. He stared at her. That wasn't fear, he said quietly. Lena said nothing. He attacked again, fury creeping in now. He wanted dominance back. He wanted to punish the doubt crawling into his gut. He swung high. She ducked. He swung low. She checked it. Every movement sharpened. Cleaner. Faster. And the men around the ring began to notice. Boss, someone muttered. Rocco heard it too. Anger flared across his face. He roared and threw everything he had into one final punch, a wild, desperate haymaker meant to reclaim control. It was the worst possible choice. Lena's body reacted before her mind could intervene. She pivoted sharply, stepping inside the arc of the punch, and drove a compact strike into his side, not full power, but enough. The sound echoed. Rocco staggered backward, breath leaving him in a violent rush. He crashed against the ropes, barely staying upright. Silence slammed down. Lena stood perfectly still, chest rising and falling, fists clenched at her sides. She had crossed the line. There was no pretending now. Rocco stared at her, eyes burning, not with rage, but with awe. You're holding back, he said hoarsely. She closed her eyes briefly. Too late. He straightened with effort, pain etched into every line of his body. If you wanted me on the floor, he continued, I'd be there. She met his gaze for the first time fully. Yes, she said quietly. The word hit harder than any punch. Before Rocco could respond, a sharp crack split the air. Not from the ring. From upstairs. Gunfire. The sound was unmistakable. Pop, pop, pop. Shouts echoed down the stairwell. Heavy boots thundered. Chaos bled through the concrete walls. Rocco's head snapped toward the stairs. That's not mine, he said. Lena's instincts flared instantly, sharper than anything she'd felt in the ring. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was an invasion. Another burst of gunfire echoed, closer now. Rocco turned back to her, eyes hard, calculating. Looks like, he said grimly, we're out of time. Lena wiped the blood from her cheek with the back of her hand. Whatever mask she'd been wearing was gone. Stay behind me, she said. Rocco blinked. What? She didn't repeat herself. Because the footsteps were already on the stairs. And the next few seconds would decide who walked out of that room alive. The first man through the stairwell door wasn't subtle. He came fast, weapon already raised, eyes scanning for targets instead of faces. His boots hit the concrete in a rhythm Lena recognized instantly. Not thugs. Professionals. Down. Rocco barked, already moving, but Lena was faster. She didn't duck. She advanced. The gunman squeezed the trigger. Lena closed the distance in 3 strides. The first shot went wide as she slapped the barrel upward with her left hand, redirecting the muzzle just enough to ruin the line. The second never fired. Her right elbow drove into his throat with a dry, cracking sound that cut through the chaos. He collapsed, choking, weapon clattering to the floor. Lena caught it by the strap and spun, using his falling body as cover just as the next two gunmen burst through the doorway. Bullets slammed into the dead weight shielding her back. Concrete dust exploded. Rocco dove behind a stack of gym mats, drawing a pistol from his ankle holster and returning fire with controlled precision. But he was reacting. Lena was dictating. She dropped to one knee, peering around the collapsing body, and fired 2 clean shots. Crack. Crack. One man went down immediately. The other stumbled, clutching his leg, screaming. Lena was already moving. She vaulted the ring ropes in a fluid motion that looked almost unreal, sprinted, and drove her knee into the wounded man's temple before he could recover. Silence crashed down again. The smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. Rocco stared from behind cover, chest heaving, not from exertion, but from disbelief. He had seen killers. He had employed them. He had survived them. But this was different. This wasn't violence born of rage or fear. It was efficiency. More coming, Lena said, already scanning the stairwell. Her voice was calm. Flat. Tactical. How do you know? Rocco asked. Because this wasn't random, she replied. They moved too clean. As if summoned by her words, the heavy steel door at the top of the stairs exploded inward. Automatic fire ripped down the stairwell. Rocco swore and fired back, keeping heads down, but he was outmatched. Too many angles. Too much pressure. Lena grabbed a metal chair and hurled it into the stairwell, not to hit, but to distract. She sprinted toward Rocco, crouching beside him. Can you move? She asked. He nodded. I can shoot. Good, she said. Then listen. She leaned close, voice sharp and precise. When I say go, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. What about you? She checked the remaining rounds in the gun. I'll be fine. He hesitated. She didn't. Now, she snapped. Rocco bolted toward the far exit as Lena rose into the open. She didn't spray bullets. She counted. Every movement was geometry. Distance. Timing. Angles. She fired, advanced, shifted. 2 more men fell. The last one hesitated. That was all she needed. She closed the gap and ended it. When the echoes finally died, Lena stood alone amid the wreckage, chest rising slowly, eyes cold and alert. Rocco stopped at the door and turned back. He looked at her, not as a waitress, not even as a fighter. But as something else entirely. You saved my life, he said quietly. She didn't answer. Because survival wasn't something she celebrated. She walked past him, weapon lowered but ready. Move, she said. This place is burned. And for the first time in his life, Rocco Valenti obeyed without question. They didn't stop running until the city swallowed them. Cold air burned Lena's lungs as they burst out of the service exit and into the alley behind the Aurelius. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, too far to help, close enough to warn. Neon lights flickered overhead. Trash bins overflowed. The glamorous illusion of the club died the moment they crossed the threshold. Rocco stumbled once. Lena caught his arm without thinking. He stiffened instinctively, pride flaring, then stopped. Let her steady him. That alone told her how badly the balance had shifted. They reached the corner and Lena shoved him behind a parked car, scanning both directions before crouching beside him. Listen carefully, she said. That wasn't a robbery. That wasn't a hit on the club. Rocco wiped sweat from his face, eyes still sharp. It was for me. Yes, she said. And they knew exactly where to find you. That landed. Rocco's jaw tightened. In his world, information leaks were worse than bullets. Bullets killed bodies. Leaks killed empires. My men, he said slowly. One of them talked. Or someone followed you, Lena replied. Either way, this location is compromised. He exhaled hard. I have safe houses. Not anymore. He looked at her then, really looked. No arrogance. No dismissal. Just calculation meeting something unfamiliar. Trust. You're not just trained, he said quietly. You're something else. She met his gaze evenly. I'm someone who survives. Another siren wailed, closer this time. Rocco straightened as much as his bruised body allowed. Then we do this my way. We regroup. I put my people on this. No, she said. The word stopped him cold. No, he repeated, incredulous. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint tremor in her hands now that the adrenaline was fading. Not weakness. Aftershock. Your way got you found, she said. Your patterns are known. Your people are predictable. He bristled. Old instinct. Old crown. You don't give orders to me, he said sharply. Lena didn't flinch. I just saved your life, she replied. Twice. Silence stretched between them. Rocco searched her face for fear. Found none. Only exhaustion and resolve. What do you want? He asked. She considered the question carefully. I want this to end, she said. Cleanly. And then? And then I disappear. Rocco laughed once, humorless. You don't disappear from things like this. She held his gaze. I do. I always have. He shook his head slowly. You're wrong. People like you don't vanish. They change the shape of the board. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know how to fight. You know how to move. You saw things before they happened back there. That's not luck. That's experience. She said nothing. I can protect you, he continued. Resources. Names. Safe passage. Whatever you're running from, I can bury it. Her eyes hardened. You don't know what I'm running from. I know enough, he said. Enough to know that hiding behind an apron isn't living. That struck deeper than she expected. Lena looked away first. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city rushed past, unaware that two lives had just collided hard enough to alter both trajectories. Finally, she exhaled. This isn't employment, she said. I don't take orders. I don't clean up messes made by ego. Rocco nodded once. Agreed. And if you cross me, once, I'm gone. Fair. And I choose when we fight, she finished. Not you. Rocco met her terms without hesitation. Done. The ease with which he agreed told her everything. This man had learned something tonight. She extended her hand. Not in submission. In contract. Rocco looked at it, then took it firmly. The gesture sealed more than an alliance. It marked the end of underestimation, on both sides. Then we're even, he said. No, Lena replied softly. We're aligned. As they released hands, the sirens finally screamed past them toward the club they had left behind in ruins. Rocco glanced back once, then forward. What's your real name? He asked. Lena paused. You don't need it, she said. Not yet. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. For the first time that night, it wasn't predatory. They returned to the Aurelius 3 nights later. Not through the front entrance. Not together. The club had reopened quietly, its shattered illusion carefully reconstructed. New security. New faces. Fresh flowers masking the scent of gunpowder that still clung to the walls beneath layers of perfume and money. But fear remembered. Rocco Valenti arrived first. He walked through the doors like a man who had never bled on the concrete beneath the building. His suit was darker now. Simpler. No excess. The kind worn by men who no longer needed to advertise power. Conversation dipped the moment he appeared. Not in shock. In recognition. He took his usual seat at the center booth. Alone. Across the room, a waitress moved among the tables. Same uniform. Same oversized sleeves. Same apologetic posture. Different eyes. Lena carried a tray past the bar, her steps unhurried, her presence dismissed instantly by the men who believed they understood the world. She didn't look at Rocco. Not yet. The man who had grabbed her wrist days earlier sat at a side table, laughing loudly, already drunk. His face bore faint bruises, gifts from someone else, somewhere else. He hadn't learned anything. Men like him rarely did. He snapped his fingers as she passed. You, he said. Careful this time. Lena stopped. Slowly, deliberately, she turned. The room leaned in without realizing it. She stepped closer to his table, set the tray down gently, and met his eyes. No, she said calmly. You'll be careful. A ripple passed through the space. The man blinked. What did you just? Rocco stood. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. Rocco didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Leave, he said to the man. Confusion followed. Boss? Now. The man pushed back his chair, scrambling to comply. As he passed Lena, she didn't move. Didn't watch him go. Rocco turned to the room. Some of you witnessed a mistake here a few nights ago, he said evenly. An assumption. No one spoke. He gestured toward Lena. This woman was underestimated. Lena stepped forward. She untied her apron. The sound of fabric sliding free felt louder than any gunshot. She removed her glasses and set them on the table beside Rocco's untouched wine glass. Eyes widened. Postures shifted. Recognition bloomed too late. Rocco continued, she chose restraint when she could have chosen destruction. He met her gaze briefly. That choice is why you're all still breathing. Silence swallowed the room whole. Lena straightened fully now, no longer shrinking, no longer hiding. I won't repeat myself, she said calmly. And I won't explain. Her voice carried. Not loudly. Precisely. Rocco sat back down. The king had spoken. The queen had been revealed. No applause followed. No confrontation. Just quiet, collective understanding. Power had shifted. And everyone felt it. Lena picked up her glasses, paused, then slid them into her pocket instead of putting them on. She turned and walked away from the floor. This time, no one looked through her. They watched. Lena never wore the apron again. The Aurelius changed in quiet ways after that night. The music stayed softer. The laughter became more careful. Power no longer announced itself with cruelty, but with restraint. People learned quickly which rules were no longer negotiable. Rocco Valenti ruled differently now. Not softer, sharper. He listened more. Watched longer. Spoke less. And when he did, his words carried the weight of someone who had stood one step from losing everything. At his side, Lena was never introduced. She didn't need a title. Those who mattered learned her presence the same way they learned gravity, by what happened when they ignored it. She chose her battles. She set boundaries. She disappeared when she wanted to. Stayed when it mattered. And for the first time in years, she wasn't running. The world had always tried to decide who she was. Victim, weapon, waitress, ghost. But power, she learned, wasn't about domination. It was about knowing exactly who you are. And never needing to prove it to anyone who underestimates you. The king lost his arrogance. The mouse was never weak. And the woman they both underestimated became something far more dangerous. An equal.